some years ago, you wrote a very important book. It's called The Break-Up of Australia, The Real Agenda of Aboriginal Recognition. The Real Agenda of Aboriginal Recognition. Keith, what was that all about?
Well, the title, The Break-Up of Australia, actually came from an article I wrote, I think 15 years before that, in 2000, just at the start of the new century. I decided to write a review of a book by Nugget Coombs called Aboriginal Autonomy, and a book by Henry Reynolds called, well, I forgot the exact name, it's a similar sort of title, that Aborigines were the real owners of the continent of Australia. This was their case, and that the British annexation of Australia was illegal, and the Aborigines really have the place to themselves. They never ceded sovereignty. They had sovereignty beforehand. And I wrote a review of those two books, and I didn't believe a word they said, because I thought the whole thing was legally concocted and historically false. It was a myth, as you say. But that was just one article, and it sort of disappeared as articles do from magazines. But the idea stayed with me, and in 2011, Julia Gillard sort of revived the ideas that Coombs and Reynolds had been pushing in the 1990s, and she appointed a committee to write a report that would give it to her. And all this business about having a referendum to recognise the Aboriginal voice and to, in my view, fundamentally change the political and physical structure of Australia, because there'd be a lot of places where people now who think they can go there won't be able to go there because it'll be exclusive Aboriginal land. That thing whole started with a series of analyses by mostly Aboriginal people, not entirely, appointed by Gillard, and there's been a series of reports and investigations ever since. And I took issue with all of them. I started writing a few articles, like Megan Davis, who's now the sort of principal author of most of the material that's that's a part of the constitutional change. She wrote an article in an academic journal saying that Aborigines never had the vote when the Constitution of Australia was written, and when the Federation came about in 1901, and that the same was true for women, Chinese, South Pacific Islanders, and anyone else you could think of. And she said this whole thing of Australian constitutional establishment was something was conducted by and in the interests of a small body of middle class white men, really Christian white men, we needed a radical change of the whole concept of Australia and the nature of politics. That was her line. And I decided to write an article about this because I used to teach Australian history at University of New South Wales for about 20 years or so, and I knew what she was saying was rubbish. Because the people of my generation knew that when the Constitution was founded, that one of the big things about it was that everybody who was considered to be an adult male got the vote. There were restrictions in Western Australia and in Queensland for mainly designed for against Aboriginal people. But anybody who was poor and didn't have $100 worth of property or rental property couldn't vote in those two states. But in the other four states, it was one man, one vote, and the Constitution promised that the minute that the that federation was started, there would be a vote to allow women to vote in the federation, because by that time in most of the states of Australia women had the vote, and so in 1902 we had a vote for women. There was there was a law passed that gave the vote to women, and there was a debate in Parliament about the whole issue of women voting and Aborigines voting, and it turned out that in 4 states all Aborigines, men and women, had the vote, and the Chinese had the vote even if they hadn't been born in Australia. They'd been because they were British subjects, they could have the vote in the colonies of Australia before Federation, and because the Constitution said anyone who's got the vote in the colonies before Federation automatically gets the vote in the new Federation or Commonwealth of Australia. So this one article by Megan Davis, who I'd never heard of before, presented itself as an article to me, which I wrote. I then found in writing that her comrade at the University of New South Wales Law School, which has always been a strongly left-wing law school, George Williams, he sort of backed up that argument, and this was coming out into the reports that Gillard and her successors commissioned from various academics and various political figures in the Aboriginal activist movement. And I just found myself knowing from my previous teaching of history that most of this was wrong. I always believed that Australia was the most democratic nation on earth, and at the time of Federation, that was the belief. Left-wing, right-wing politics, everyone felt that this was a great thing, and teaching it, I used to be enthusiastic with my students about this, and to suddenly find that there are people who say, not only am I wrong, but the whole thing about Australian Federation is wrong, seemed to me something that needed to be corrected, if I can put it gently. So, and the book, The Breakup of Australia, based on an article that I'd written where the sort of, the linchpins of that concept had been presented before. It was a revival of the movement for constitutional change. Is a revival of ideas put up by Nugget Coombs and Henry Reynolds in the 1990s, and brought into fruition, if you like, with the election of the Albanese government, who decided to go ahead with it. And I see from this morning's papers that Anthony Albanese has admitted that he doesn't know the detail of what's involved. He's only read a one-page document about it, and you've got to wonder what on earth is happening to this country. It's not a matter of race or black and white. It's a matter of the fundamental principles of government, that this country has become as good as it is, and. I'm sort of worried that still, even though the polls make it look as if the vote will go down, the vote for the referendum will go down, I'm worried that expectations will not be like the England beat the Matildas last night, and the yes could just as well come up with a few goals and beat the no case, which I support.